In case you haven't recognized me since last time, I'm still Alexei Melnikov, and my co-chair couldn't come this time. But he was very gracious to do slides for me. I hope you all seen Note well. I'm not going to read it. And this is favorite Murray slide, but I'm not sure I'm very good in impersonating him. Pick, you are the area director. So yes, I'm sorry, we do have scribes, we do have people in Jabra who can relay things to the mic. We have blue sheets circulating. Which Jabra room have you picked, Barry?
John said APPSAWG.
Okay, so it's going to be APPSAWG at Jabra room. Right, so the first part of the meeting is APPSAWG working group. I've done that. Quick note on status of documents. We got one document published, a property types registry for authentication results. Two documents are in the RFC editors queue waiting for dependency, which is just being finalized. There are one document, URI scheme registration procedure, just finished IETF last call and is on agenda for the next HD telechat in April. Another one just started, form data is still an IETF last call. One document, which is HTTP problem statement, is waiting for feedback from W3C tag people. Okay, Mark promised to put some feedback on the mailing list. His draft is about to expire and going to be deleted. Okay, so yeah, please do. We still have 5 documents in progress in the working group. File URI scheme, update to MDN reports, update to authentication results, header field registration, and 2 text markdown related documents. And where is Sean? Come here. And he's going to present a few quick slides on text markdown.
Is this mic?
Yeah. Is it okay?
Yes. It is on? Okay.
Just a bit faint.
How about now? Mic on?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Good morning, everybody. I guess we're starting off with the text slash markdown media type update. I'm Sean Leonard. This should be hopefully very quick, but obviously I'd invite any comments or suggestions because I think we're getting fairly close to complete on this document so we can get them off the queue in the last call and so forth. Next, please. All right, so for those who have been following or not following text markdown, it's a family of lightweight text formatting syntaxes that are mostly compatible but not necessarily 100% identical to each other. The main feedback from the past couple of IETFs was, and from the mailing list, was to simplify as much as possible. So between draft 3, which was from November, and now to draft 6, The media type registration has been drastically simplified. There are now only two parameters, char set, which is required, and the variant parameter, which is supposed to be very lightweight, with very streamlined registration. In draft 05, I also simplified the fragment identifiers, and then in draft 06, it was mainly housekeeping updates with the ABNF for what type of syntax is allowed in the variant parameter, and I removed the notes. As a companion to this, next slide please, the text markdown use cases document was also added as a WG document, and there are now added and updated examples of different types or variants of markdown that are registered, again as examples for people to follow to kind of understand what variants there are. I believe some of them, if you look at the document, include Pandoc, GitHub flavored markdown, and our own cramdown RFC 2629, which can be used to edit RFCs and internet draft type documents using markdown. So with that, next slide please. We are pretty much done, at least from my perspective. I think all the comments have been addressed thus far, and would love to hear any final feedback so we can make final edits and again push this off the queue. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Good.
You have any quick questions? All right. That was a very short APPSAWG meeting, and now we are moving to application area stuff. Yeah. So this is the part of the agenda when our area directors would like working group chairs or representative from different working groups to come to the mic and quickly talk about progress of their working groups and what's happening. Thank you.
Apparently I'm the only one.
I can see long queue.
I knew we were shutting down APPSAWG, but geez.
Yeah.
You want
No, you can
in
stay
order?
here.
In order? Or?
No, sorry. Any order. Just come to the mic.
Okay, Précis co-chair. We're almost done. All the main documents have been gone through. Working group last call. Framework is going to RFC, and so we may have a very small working group discussion about those documents. However, depending on Lucid, we may have additional discussion depending.
Thank you. Mark?
HTTP, we finished HTTP 2, and that's in the RFC editor queue. We have auth info, which I think is in IETF last call.
I believe so, yeah.
And a few other documents coming down the pipe pretty quickly. So this week is going to be pretty quiet. We're just going to try and wrap up the opportunistic encryption and the alternative services stuff and get working group last call started on those, as well as the tunnel protocol document, and talk about what other possible work is out there for us, if any.
Okay.
Donald Eastlake with Huawei. I'm co-chair of CalExt. So we had 3 documents that were mentioned in the charter, personal drafts. One of them is now in the RFC editor's queue, having gone through the whole process. The other 2 were actually adopted by the working group a little while ago. I just pinged the authors, and I expect the working group versions to be posted this week.
Hi, Yoav Nir for WebSec. Our last document, key pinning, is past auth 48. We're waiting for our one dependency that's also in auth 48, and somebody in this room has to be done with his comments.
Matt Miller for JSON. We're done.
Yay!
So Daniel Migo for TZ East. We have 2 drafts. One has already had the working group last call, so we're only addressing some small comments we had about privacy. So it should be done very soon. And the other is an extension of this first draft, so it should be also done quite soon. And we hope we can update the milestone very soon.
Carsten Bormann, Co-Working Group. We finished the first wave of documents and are, for some of them, still looking for shepherds to give them the final push. The second wave is now the focus of the consideration, and one thing maybe that's interesting is that we are looking at how to do management in a way that works together with application area. That will require some rechartering.
Mm-hmm.
Dave Crocker, ARC Media Working Group, which is creating a new top-level media type. The document has received 2 independent reviews privately, and we are awaiting those comments to be folded back into the draft before I'll propose that we adopt the draft as a working group document.
Leif Johansson, SKIM and UTAs. SKIM is pretty much done. We're thinking about whether there's extension work to be done, and we're going to talk about some of those ideas during the week. UTA is finishing up the first swath of documents. Our attack draft is out, RC 7457. The BCP draft is in the editor's queue. We've got a bunch of other stuff. The XMPP draft is also publication requested. So we got a bunch of stuff done. Right now, the working group is seems to be focusing on the email, and we really need people to come and help us sort of inform the discussion. There's a lot of there is also the question of what if any we should do about opportunistic security for TLS. And if people who think they know how to formulate the problem, would you please turn up at UTA and help us with that?
Jim Galvin for APP Extensions. We're meeting this week on the last working group session on the last day. We do short straw. But we published one RFC since the last IETF meeting, the document which describes the EPP Extensions Registry, now being served by IANA, so that's a good thing. We have 4 documents describing EPP extensions, which this Friday we're hoping that all of them, or at least most of them, we should be ready for working group last call, and so we'll be able to push those out the door. And I also expect to have a discussion about rechartering the group and creating it as an opportunity for working through EPP extensions that are going to go onto the standard track. The registry, which is available in IANA, doesn't require standards track. It's really there to create a catalog of all extensions. So for those that want to go to an IETF standard, we want to, and we do have a few candidates already on the list to go forward with, but the expectation is that more will come along as we keep going. So this will provide a forum to deal with them. Thanks.
Olaf Kolkman for Weirds. Weirds is essentially done. All the documents are in Auth48, waiting for the bootstrap IANA considerations to be implemented. That's either done or very close to being done.
I am told there is a slim but non-zero chance that IANA will complete their work today, that the RFC editor can get the documents pushed before Wednesday, and I can push the button and shut down the working group before the plenary, and I'm out the door. So I'm in favor of that if it can be pulled off.
Hi, Frank for team with chair of DMARC. We publish it as RFC 7489, the DMARC spec as informational, and the DMARC interoperability document is progressing.
Marc Blanchet, public announcement. Working group chair lunch is about interiorization and pre-C, so and will be done by Andrew Sullivan. And so, yeah, working group chair lunch. I would really suggest that you all come. Really useful.
This is Pete. One that didn't get mentioned was PAWS. PAWS was stuck in a misref on the on the Précis document. So it is now unstuck.
So it's all your fault anyway.
It's all my fault anyway. So those should be both going through relatively quickly now.
And I think that leaves HiBi and URN-BIS. HiBi has its final document still churning, ready to come to me any time now. The author and the chair have been giving me periodic updates about the wordsmithing that's going on. So I'm hoping to be able to close HiBi soon. And URN-BIS has an important discussion to happen with nobody actually going to be in the room, as far as I can tell. So there's going to be a lot of remote participation on this one on Thursday. The issue is closing out the main document that is separating the semantics of URNs out of the semantics of URIs, and then respecifying how to register this stuff and use it. So if you care, if you're one of the 2 or 3 people in the world who care about URNs, come on Thursday.
And Murray typed the status of DMARC into the Jabber room, but
It was presented.
It was presented, thank you. Well, I'm going deaf.
I mean, if there is anything to add from Murray, then okay. Okay, this is the section talking about new working groups and all over the IETF and possible relevance to application area. Anybody can comment on these?
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, it's just a bit faint.
I'm usually not in this meeting, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Andy Malice. I'm the co-chair for the PALS working group, which is pseudowire and LDP-enabled services in the routing area. And this is actually the second meeting for the working group this week, so it's not really a completely new working group, it's close enough. This is actually the merger of 2 previous working groups. It's the merger of the PWE3 working group, which did pseudowires over MPLS and L2TPv3, and part of the former L2VPN working group. It's the part that dealt with LDP-enabled tunnels. So we do a lot of work at what people sometimes think of as layer 2.5, which is above Ethernet and below IP. To do tunnels for all kinds of protocols that you normally wouldn't otherwise carry through an IP network. So, any questions? Well, thank you.
Any other takers about the other 3? All right. Barry waves, and then he changes his mind.
I changed my mind because, we just got something popped up there. Oh, I kicked it. Sorry about that. Anyway, I changed my mind because there's one that's on here that's not on here that I wanted to mention, which is TokeBind, which just got chartered within the last week or 2.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of our protocols use what amount to bearer tokens, either explicitly or implicitly. For instance, web cookies are bearer tokens. OAuth uses bearer tokens. The point there is that anybody who snitches one of the tokens by snooping the data stream can go reuse it somewhere else and in some other context where they're not supposed to. The idea of TokeBind is coming up with a shared secret binding with the client so that somebody who steals your bearer token can't use it to impersonate you.
It has to be used on the same, like, TLS session or something associated with it.
The mechanism will be
Right.
developed by the working group, but that's the point of the working group, and it's something that we should definitely be interested in. It's in the security area, but something we should definitely be paying attention to.
Okay.
Carsten Bormann, just a quick comment on beer. I have a draft that is related to that, but I'm not a beer guy. You have seen me running around saying multicast doesn't work, and beer is taking a little step forward to making multicast work a little bit better.
All right. Okay. And now there are several sessions. I knew both sessions this week. If people would like to come to the mic and comment on this. That's it, yeah.
Hi, my name's Nick Teague. I'm the proponent for the DOTS BOF, the DDoS Open Threat Signaling. The idea of the BOF is to raise awareness and to gain some understanding of whether we should proceed with a standard protocol, reusing protocols, that is, a standard method reusing protocols, existing protocols such as HTTPS and IPFix, for the signaling between DDoS mitigation devices and a service provider or other DDoS mitigation devices. We have a couple of drafts in process. We have a main draft for the DDoS signaling process, and we have another complementary draft that we will be discussing in the actual BOF. We also have a panel discussion, and we hope to get some traction on that and some understanding of whether this is something we want to move forward with.
Okay. When is the BOF? Do you remember?
The BOF is tomorrow, Tuesday at 15:20.
Okay. Yep. Mark?
I have for two, Lucid. So this is, if you may recall, there was an IAB statement about the fact that there's some issues being discovered about how, well, let's say normalization is used in Unicode, to be simple. And so the IB called for the IETF to look at this problem and work on it, and the Lucid is actually the BOF about this. It has impact on IDNA and PREC. So it may happen that the purpose of the BOF is to actually agree on the scope of the problem, which is the most difficult part. We expect to have Unicode people attending remotely at least, and the outcome would be something that may involve revising both IDNA and PREC. And I can talk about SUPA if you... SUPA, this for application people is actually something that you should think about, because that's the idea here is to have a controller, SDN controllers, that you control. So you control the controllers, or you signal to the controller, give me a QoS path for going somewhere, because I'm an application, a real-time application, and I want something on the network for me. So the intent of this is somewhere above the SDN controller is to actually, an APIs of some sort that the applications, various kind of applications could signal to the controller, give me something in the network. So.
Rich Sauls here for ACME, Wednesday afternoon, second session. It's a certificate enrollment protocol designed for websites online. The idea being that you install Apache or IE and then do apt-get certificate, and you've got a certificate that's in a particular deployment trusted by all the browsers. We've done several certificate enrollment protocols before. This one we want to make sure works for the web.
Whoa. Oh, good. Joe's going to do it. I didn't see anybody standing up. Sorry. A question to the chair?
I have slides in just a minute, so we'll talk more about SPUD in just a moment, I think.
Okay.
Actually, I was just going to say 2 words about it now. Please. Okay. So
Mirya and I will be co-chairing SPUD, but Joe's doing most of the heavy lifting, I have to say. That's Wednesday morning, and there's going to be a lot of application interaction. You're going to talk about it next. So Joe's going to talk about it, and that's the most I'll say.
All right. Right, at this point, we'll give a slot to our esteemed area director, Barry, to talk about ISG restructuring.
Hey, go up front.
Hi, I'm Barry Lieb. This microphone does not work as well as the other one.
No.
I'm Barry Lieb, you all know that. So Pete, my co-area director, is, stand up Pete. So applaud him, he's leaving. He's just spent... He's just spent 4 years doing crazy stuff, and he's now happy not to have to be a lunatic anymore. Now he can be Pete, which is grumpy and at the mic again, as he says. So part of that, we, as you probably all know, we asked the NOMCOM not to replace Pete, partly because he's irreplaceable, but partly because we wanted the flexibility to do some reorganization of the areas. And where we've come, we've given you some heads up on this stuff on the way through, and where we've come is to propose a merger of the RAI and app areas. In, I think it was 2006 or somewhere thereabouts, we split off RAI as a new area by taking some working groups from apps and some from transport and creating a new area. We're now undoing that and putting them back together. In the process, we'll probably pick up a couple of working groups from transport, but not right away. And we're going to shift a couple of things around to security area and operations. So UTA will likely go to the security area. I think Stephen is going to pick that one up. Or stay in apps, but Stephen will pick that up, which is another aspect of that I'll mention in a second. So that's the main change that you're going to see is a merger of apps and RAI, and the proposed name for that merged area is ART, Applications in Real Time. So the maybe stay in apps and have Stephen be the responsible AD is something else that we've done as part of this. There was a little bit of a data tracker tweak we had to make, but now the AD who is responsible for a working group is not necessarily an AD in the area that the working group is scheduled in. So now we have sort of a separation of, for grouping purposes, we've said that this may be in one area, but the responsible AD may be an AD from another area. So we're seeing that with a number of working groups now, particularly things that were moved from ops, from Benoit Claes's responsibilities to ADs in other areas, but they still live in the ops area. Is there something significant? Oh, and then the other thing is that we now have 3 routing area directors. There's a big, the routing area is the biggest area in workload, and the routing area directors felt that they needed help. They needed another area director, and so we asked the NOMCOM to do that, and they did. Pete, is there anything else that you think needs to be said? Dave, have at it.
Dave Crocker, about having a working group in an area but with an area director from a different area, what does it mean to be in the area if the area director is from a different area?
The idea was that we group working groups into areas for a number of different reasons. And some of them have to do with scheduling, some of them have to do with informing the community about related work. That this falls into that group of related work, and some of it has to do with management of the working groups. And what we realized was that we don't necessarily have to tie management of the working groups into the other aspects. So it's a way of distributing the workload among the area directors and taking an area director who, UTA is a good example, where there's a lot of aspects of apps and a lot of aspects of security in it. Which area do we stick it in? And so that's...
So one of the things that we've seen in the past is we've had area directors be technical advisors. In other words, we had a working group that needed some clue from security or needed some clue from somewhere else, and so we had this technical advisor listed. We've ended up in the past with situations where that AD did most of the heavy lifting except couldn't push any of the buttons. They were actually managing the working group, but we wanted to give them the ability to actually push all the buttons. The working group staying in the area, so take UTA, one of the considerations that we're going through is we want the constituency and the ownership to be by this community because we think that's the way to get the right people into the room, to have the right people thinking about those discussions. But there's no reason that Stephen couldn't take on the management tasks themselves, and security clue would be useful for that purpose.
Dave again, thank you. So it's really interesting to see the IETF move towards matrix management.
That word has gotten tossed around much to the cringing of everybody, but in this particular case it seemed to work reasonably well.
Colin James, I think it's a great idea, but it causes a lot, inside of the ISG and the people dealing with this is an everyday thing and you can deal with it, it all makes sense, but it causes a lot of confusion, these changes, for people outside, particularly people who don't even come to IETF. And so I'd rather not have a continuous series of changes, I'd rather get all my bad news or good news or whatever it is at once. And because of that, I think we should deal with the transport area issues at the same time. I mean, there's, previous ADs like myself made many mistakes or whatever. We've seen, as working groups evolved, there's definitely some things that make no sense there and should be rationalized. I think everyone agrees with that. I just think that we should do that at the same time. I don't think we should wait. And I understand that all the people doing this are probably worn down by getting to where we are already. And I know the feeling of, just let me call it done. But really, I would encourage us to just do the extra little bit that we know needs to be done and get it really right to start with. Thank you. And thanks for doing it.
Thanks.
And just, to answer Cullen, transport and what we're doing with transport is pretty much next on the list as far as there's active work in trying to get that rationalized. So it's probably not going to happen all at once in one big, drop, but it is going to happen in relatively short succession.
Well, and it might happen in one drop.
It could, yeah. I'm just saying, it sounds good. Just recognize that outside of the IETF, the multiple series of drops causes exponentially more confusion.
Well noted, thank you. And as to timing on this, which I hadn't mentioned, you probably also know, or maybe you don't, that Alyssa Cooper, who is one of the RI ADs, is out on maternity leave now and expects to be back in the June time frame-ish, give or take. None of this is actually going to happen in a button-pushing thing until she's back. So we have a retreat the first week in May. The IAB and IESG will get together, and we will finalize these plans then. And the actual implementation will happen after Alyssa's back and we're able to arrange everything. So it's possible that by then we will have the transport stuff sorted out too and do it all together. I'm not sure. Chris?
Chris Newman, channeling from the Jabber room. There's a request for people to state their name clearly when they come up to the mic.
Does anyone else have comments or questions about the area reorganization? Okay.
Is it
Larry?
Director, it's an APPSA working group and all this stuff.
Yes, good. Thank you. Larry Macinter asked something about the apps area working group, apps area directors, whatever. So the merged area called ART will then have 3 area directors, which will be Alyssa Cooper, Ben Campbell, and me. And we expect to also at the retreat figure out how we're going to specify the what we call job description, what do we call it, expertise, desired expertise to convey to the NOMCOM for the next NOMCOM cycle, where I will be up for, Alyssa and I will both be up for renewal or replacement, and so we need a clear thing to give the NOMCOM for that, and we've changed the area, so we'll need to change that. At the moment, we are still planning to do have the apps area working group and the dispatch working group, which is the corresponding working group in RAI, but they work very differently from each other. And so that's one thing that I'm going to be talking with the chairs at lunch, and I should bring it up here, that I would like to change the way the apps area working group does its work to be more in the direction of what dispatch does, though perhaps not completely. Dispatch works by reviewing work that's proposed and finding a home for it. And the home is either there's a working group it belongs in, or let's spin up a new working group for it. And they don't process documents themselves. The apps area working group sometimes does a good job of processing documents, but often I think the documents don't get the attention they ought to have. And it would be better to have small, short-lived, focused working groups to deal with those documents. And I'd like to see the apps area working group move more in that direction of spinning up new working groups rather than processing the documents themselves. Dave.
Dave Crocker. So the original reason for having the apps area working group deal with some documents without spinning up a working group is that spinning up a working group is high overhead. And so the statements of have it be quick, short-lived is obviously good intention. Everybody would like that, but doesn't tend to reflect reality. And so please comment on making reality match that ideal.
I think reality does match that ideal much more than it used to. Pete and I have been, over the last 3 years, having a lot of success in spinning up short-lived working groups quickly. The quickest one, we actually wound up chartering, I think it was 4 weeks from when we started writing the charter to when it got chartered. More typical is maybe 6 to 8, but it's not being, we're trying to avoid having a three or 4 month period of chartering with a BOF before it and not having the work get done for 1.5 years or 2 years. The idea here is to try to spin up a working group in weeks rather than months and have it finish its work in, say, 6 months rather than 18. And I think 3 months was the quickest. Oh, how many working groups? We've had 3 or 4 working groups like that. But CalExt is one of them that is currently going. Sorry, yeah, IMAP Move was the really quick one. So we've had a few, and we have running code that says that works, and I'd like to do more of that. The other reason that Apps Area Working Group was created was to handle documents that were just too simple to bother with a working group, and I expect that it will still be doing those, but we need to take a close look at what simple really means, because we've had a couple of cases that blew up in our faces where they weren't as simple as we thought. Elliot?
Yeah, Elliot Lear. So I've chaired 2 of these short-lived working groups. One of them is not as short as we would like, but it's coming close. Q-Resync was the first one, and that we didn't actually ever meet, and I think it worked out just fine. Currently, I've got TZ-Dist with Daniel in the room here as well, and that one, I think it's moving along. We're never actually, I think, going to meet again. The only issue is we hit up on a couple of privacy concerns that Daniel was kind enough to point out, and we're just sorting through a few of those last issues, and I expect the group to be finished with its work before the next IETF.
Dave again. So you described that Pete and you are the ones that have been pressing for this, and that matches my perception. And half of you are disappearing from that role. And to my knowledge, there is no documentation of this philosophy or general adoption of this philosophy in the culture of IETF management. It would be great if it would be, no objection to that, but there's a small problem with tendency towards increasing bureaucracy, which is what got us to the original problem that you're trying to deal with, and the likelihood we'll get back to it.
That's fair. It is documented right now in the IESG wiki, and we discuss it regularly with the other ADs. At some point, just as the dispatch model was put into a BCP, we could put this into a BCP or add it to the dispatch, tweak the dispatch model BCP. As part of merging the areas, we need to tweak the dispatch BCP anyway, because it specifically references the RAI area and that sort of thing. And Ben's idea is to pull out all of the implementation stuff from that, or not implementation, the organizational management stuff, and say, here's how you implement this function. Working group charters can point to this and say, we're going to operate in that model. Colin?
So Colin Jennings, sort of co-chair of dispatch here. Dave, I think that there really has been, in that area, there's been a large culture of this. We did document it. We probably need less documentation, not more process, exactly to your point. All you need to do is people go do it. Come on over there this afternoon. We're going to roll together probably a new working group, which will put together a charter in very little time, very little energy, and we'll go pop, pop, pop. The tools make it easier now. I think there's a lot of people that have actually been working this way for 4 years now. So.
Right. I said Pete and I because I'm referencing the apps area. Dispatch has been working this way, so the RAI area has been working this way for a while. I think it's spreading, and I hope it spreads more. Other comments? Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Next topic is IB semi-workshop. Yeah.
All right, so this mic.
It works, but it's very faint. You can use that.
Okay, so we've renamed SPUD to be Substrate Protocol for User Datagrams. If you go to the next slide, you'll see an architecture picture for what I mean by substrate. Maybe space. Okay.
I'm not using. What am I doing wrong?
Or maybe hit space. Or all right, great. Oh, it's one of those kind of things. All right, so what you would see here is boxes if this projector was showing all the colors. So if you look at the bottom, we've got an initiator application and a responder application that want to talk to one another over a set of things that they can't control. From the standpoint of an application developer, all of this stuff is stuff that somebody else ships on their own timeline that I frankly can never get changed in a timeline that matters to me. Things like socket APIs on various operating systems, the kernels themselves, what protocols are available in those, and the set of strange middle boxes between these two endpoints are all effectively out of my control. If I want to do something that is different than TCP for a variety of reasons, So maybe I want slightly different congestion control. Maybe I want to have multiple channels that have independent head-of-line blocking. Maybe I want to control retransmits because I'm doing media and I don't want retransmits, etc. What that means is that what we're left with is UDP. Various different protocols have tried to do this and have had a variety of success in getting through corporate firewalls, for example, because of the policy sort of decisions that firewall administrators make on UDP-based protocols. The idea behind SPUD is to take the minimum set of things that would be required to get people to make policy decisions in the positive direction around allowing UDP through their various middle boxes, pull that into a protocol that we could get those folks to implement once, and then open up some space for innovation in a new transport layer. I'm calling transport prime here, and then we could write applications on top of that. On the right-hand side, you see that the transport prime layer and the SPUD layer would probably be shipped as a part of a library that hopefully small numbers of competent people would work on small numbers of libraries and share the tough code that would go in there. Effectively, what you're doing is pulling transport code up into user space with interesting timing characteristics, interesting threading characteristics, interesting, et cetera, et cetera. So you hope that the people who are building that library have some skill. I assert that those people exist, and then we can start to pull them together. Next slide. So we had an IAB workshop about this shape of idea. SPUD is one of the approaches that came out of there. There's a good set of transcripts, et cetera, from that workshop if you would like to wade through the text associated with those. Somebody actually sat down and transcribed a lot of what happened. And there was a lot of sort of back and forth there, a lot of views expressed, et cetera. And the first bits of work that came out of there was the SPUD BOF, which I'll talk about in a moment, and HOPS, which was a bar BOF that we did here last night. Next slide. These are in sort of chronological order. This draft Hildebrand SPUD prototype was the first pass at describing SPUD, which was one of the outcomes of that semi-workshop. Go and read it. There's some open source code. Here's the link. And we worked on this at the hackathon over the weekend, made some good progress. We had maybe 8 people who were able to download the code, compile it, and start sending in pull requests. So please contribute if you think this is something interesting. This is one thing that might turn into one of the libraries that I was talking about before if we end up going down this path. Note on this protocol, it is labeled prototype for a reason. It's for experimentation. Don't deploy it. It has absolutely no security in it intentionally because I don't want you to deploy it. We want to learn things about the transport mechanisms that are involved, and then we'll eventually rewrite the thing, hopefully as requirements for a next generation of TLS or something along those lines. So I don't want to have the BOF here. I just wanted to point out sort of where we are status-wise. Next slide. All right, so HOPS bar BOF last night here. People were talking about how could we measure the kinds of middle box impairment that we actually see on the internet, coming up with experiments we could run, ways of sharing that data, what are the trade-offs in terms of privacy, et cetera. Aaron Falk ran that. It was interesting conversation, and there's a list going that there's a link in here. I'll send the slides around so everybody will have all the links that are in here. Next slide. All right, so the SPUD BOF is Wednesday morning. There's 3 drafts to read. The SPUD prototype draft I already mentioned. Looking at that should be pretty quick. You'll get the gist of it pretty quickly. Look at the state transition table and look at the packet diagram as a start. You'll get the rest of it pretty quickly. There's a use cases draft, which is non-protocol, but is interesting to think about why should we do this. It's a start at the use cases. It's not finished yet. And then if we were to go and put this into DTLS later, Christian wrote a TTLS guidelines draft that's the start at how we would go about that. It's not the actual protocol yet. It's the sort of directional guidelines. Next slide. And then the IB IP Stack Evolution Program is sort of the home for this at the moment. So a lot of this work is being done with our IAB hats on. Brian Trammell is the program lead for that. And if you want to participate in that more fully, see me, see Brian. We'd be happy to talk about that. The TAPS working group, I don't know when they're meeting. I should have put that on here. Today at 1. Thank you. TAPS is, in particular, the way some of that work overlaps with this or is useful to this is they're describing some of the kinds of transport mechanisms that you might want to put over top of a protocol like SPUD. So the bits I mentioned before about I might want to control the order of delivery, I might want to have multiple channels in parallel, et cetera. Those are the sorts of things they're trying to characterize. I think that's it. Questions?
Any questions?
Oh.
Okay, while Alexei pulls up my slide, I want to give a very, very quick, wonderful, this projector is so great. We had it yesterday in the Think research group, and it was very nice also.
So it's not just me or my fault, you know. Thank you for saying that.
Well, it's analog. It's using a spec from 1986. So I want to quickly report on something that's going on in the CBOR space. You may have heard about CBOR, which became an RFC 18 months ago, which is binary representation of the JSON data model plus some more, including binary information, because we tend to use binary information in the constrained node network space. Now that is done, and take-up within the IETF is increasing, so people start wondering how to actually write specs about that. For text, we have ABNF, but how do we do this? And of course, there are tons of schema languages out there. That's not really what we're trying to do. We're just trying to do a data definition language that is essentially solving the same problem that ABNF was doing. And there are people working on writing specs in this space, for instance, in the security automation space. Hank over there is doing some security automation with that. And so we took a draft that was around for a while by Bert Grevenbosch, who no longer can attend IETFs, and looked at applying it to that. And we now have a new version of this CBOR data definition language, which I think is cleaned up and is ready to be used. We essentially stole the best parts of RelaxMG and JSON content rules, which is another draft that is very interesting, and came up with a relatively simple language. And because nothing is good until it has been implemented, we actually implemented it. And there is a tool you can use. So if you have something that uses CBOR or uses the JSON data model in general, and you find the English language is not enough for what you're doing, try CDDL. So this is just an example for how the result looks like. If you have been involved in RFC 7071, there is a multi-page section in there describing the structure of the data in English, in stylized English. That is quite an achievement, but you can also put it on a single slide like this. So if that appeals to you, if that could be solving a problem, please have a look at the CDDL draft and talk to the authors. And the authors aren't here, but Hank is here, but tied up with security automation. And you can talk to me about CDDL as well. Thank you.
Any quick questions?
Hello. Okay. Capon Lee. So basically, I have like a process or organization issue here. So basically, we have several work related to CBOR. For example, we have one draft in Jose from you, and also one draft from Core about how to use CBOR to representing format, and some other draft related to CBOR. So I'm wondering if we can create a new working group about this to make gather this work together, and then it's better, because sometimes I know that Carsten is the expert on this area, but the work is divided into several groups. It's better to make them to merge all work together. Then it's better.
Yeah, that sounds like having an ABNF working group for all the documents that do ABNF. I'm not sure that's what we want to do. We want to do the work in the subject matter expert working groups. But yes, we want to have these people talk to each other in using the tools.
Joe Hildebrand, are we going to keep the JSON working group around to review all JSON documents? This is the same thing.
Is it a job for directorate or something like that? Sort of open question. I'm not actually suggesting it just here.
That's actually a fascinating question. We've got an ABNF discuss list. I expect we might eventually have a JSON discuss list for things like that, and we might have a CBOR discuss list. Or we could just use the working group mailing list, and I'm interested in Barry's opinion.
Well, there are many choices. The JSON working group is going to be closed. The JSON working group mailing list is going to be left, or the JSON mailing list is going to be left open. And I certainly hope that people will continue to discuss JSON-related things there.
Where do you expect people to talk about CBOR-related things?
I expect people to figure out where they want to talk about CBOR-related things and run that themselves. If it's a mailing list related to a closed working group, there's nothing stopping them. Well, I mean, if JSON is if the JSON mailing list is the right place, that's fine. If you want to pick a different place, you can ask for a non-working group mailing list for it. I will approve that. Or you can pick someplace else.
Carsten Bowman. Yeah, I don't think that the JSON list is the right list, because there are lots of applications of JSON that don't need CBOR. So it should be for JSON.
Okay. So then request a CBOR mailing list, and I will take this as a request for it, and I'll just go do it.
Okay, Caponi. So you mean create a separate mailing list to discuss CBOR-related topics? That's the proposal.
Yeah, I'll have a mailing list created called cbor@ietf.org and discuss it there.
And the intent would be that people who are CBOR experts would be on that list, and you could ask them questions about, does this CBOR make sense, et cetera.
Okay.
Okay. Next presentation is on protecting message headers in OpenPGP by Daniel.
So this is a proposal that came up in discussions within the OpenPGP community to protect email metadata, particularly in the headers. So next slide, please. It's going on. The working title is memory hole. We can change that. However, this is just a description, a picture of the obvious problems that we tend to have. We'll have this encrypted message. The subject line says retirement plans. It doesn't matter that Alice has encrypted the message. Now her mail transfer, whoever runs the mail server can see that she's thinking about retirement. So in the next one, it's actually a problem for signed mail as well. I get lots of mail like this that's actually signed, where the context is only relevant, is only interpretable by the context. The content is only interpretable by the context, so that you could spoof this by changing the subject line and make it look like something else is going to happen. Next, please. So, and it's not just subject, we've got all this other metadata that's quite interesting for analysis that we would like to protect. All of these different things, there are different ways that we can use, that they can be used in a surveillance context that we would like to try to defend against. So, next, please. So, in particular, we want to protect encrypted messages so that the end-to-end property of encrypted mail is actually preserved. We want to avoid the graph analysis that's possible, and we want to protect signed messages. And in particular, the issue here is that this is like it's really hard to explain the problem with encrypted email that the headers are not protected to most users. So this is actually a user-facing problem that we're hoping to solve. So next, please. So I noticed that there was this text RFC 822 headers, which is currently used for delivery status notifications. And all MUAs these days, or everyone that I've tried, seems to display them fine as a little header block. So the idea is that we would reuse this so that existing receiving mail user agents would behave in a plausible manner. Improved user agents could actually render this more cleanly by swapping out headers into the right places. And then the idea is to try to make this something that's deployable that could actually work with existing spam abatement systems. And of course, it comes from the OpenPGP community right now. There's been some interest expressed in trying to make sure that whatever we come up with here is something that's used for SMIME as well as OpenPGP. So next, please. Here's concretely what would happen. The first is what we currently see. And then in the second place here, this is for signed messages. And again, this is the OpenPGP structure. If we want to make it for SMIME, we need to think about that too. You just basically take the initial body, which is part B there, and you swap it out for a multi-part mixed, part E, that has the original body in G there, but also the actual headers that have been signed in part F. So we just take the headers of the existing message and we stick them in there, and then receiving mail user agents that know about this will be able to mark the headers as signed headers versus non-signed headers. Next, let's look at the encrypted messages. So the way I've notated this above, we've got the little arrow on line D indicates the decryption. So the decryption there is a text plain part. And then we would hide the headers by changing what has actually been encrypted. We decrypt now instead to a multi-part mixed that takes the original message body, E, puts it into L, and then again prepends it with the actual correct header. And then you strip the entire outside header and you place a dummy header there. The details of what goes in the dummy header are something that we need to sort out in more detail. We've got a couple of proposals on the table for that. So next, please. So the idea is that we can deploy this in a phased approach. You can start with sending and encrypting MUAs and then sending signing MUAs, and then we can roll out fixes to the receiving MUAs to improve the user experience for what people see. And then if we want to get MTAs in on the game as well, there's potential for mail transfer agents to actually provide more support here in stripping the last little bits of metadata that would be left. So next, please. There's an open question about what kind of signaling do we need. I don't think we actually need per message signaling. I think you can look for the presence of this header in the right place in the message to determine whether this message uses this kind of memory hole approach. I think it's an open question as to whether or not we need per recipient signaling to say, yes, I can deal, like my receiving mail user agent is capable of rendering these things fine. The goal of this is that it should render fine or acceptably, comprehensively in non-modified mail user agents. So the discussion is currently happening on the OpenPGP mailing list. If we want to make it SMIME capable as well, we need to think about some other places to discuss. It started on the GNU PG mailing list. So we don't actually have a concrete working group or anything set up for this right now, but I know a lot of things like this have been tried before. Alexi has a similar draft. I'm glad to see so many people queuing. Let's talk about it.
I think this will take a bit longer than 5 minutes, but I think it's okay.
Mine, don't go away. I have a quick question. You said that we hope that these render adequately in existing MUAs. Have you tested that yet?
Yes, I've tested. Yes, I've tested several MUAs, and they do appear to render adequately in existing MUAs.
Cool. And that was Joe Hildebrand on this side.
Hi, Sean Leonard. This issue has been already discussed extensively and resolved in SMIME for the last 10 to 15 years, or I know, 12 years or so. And it is part of RFC 5751 to do header protection using RFC 822 headers.
It's documented, but it's not implemented.
That is, well, that's partially correct. It depends on your view of what implementation is successful. I would say that for compatibility reasons, it works probably as well as the current OpenPGP implementation. So relitigating the spec will not change implementations.
So I'm aware that the, I don't know. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, so the existing SMIME approach is to embed the RFC 822 message in another layer of encryption, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So as an attachment,
but not actually as an attachment. It's just to include the body in, right. Not necessarily as an attachment. Existing MUAs that do not understand how to process it will display it as an attachment. Right.
So they see it as a forwarded message.
Yes. Correct.
Yeah. I think that is less comprehensible to users than to see a couple lines of headers at the top. But okay, I'm aware of that.
Dave Crocker, I'm always interested to see a proposal and somebody comes up and says something developed 10 years ago that almost nobody knows about has solved this problem. This is an interesting topic, and it will be relevant to the presentation I'll make later this session. It really has two parts. One is the modification of a message to adopt a MIME structure, including the header. And the second is what you then do with it to service the PGP need. I think it will be helpful, both for cleanliness of thinking and possibly flexibility of choices for the encryption and other things that one might do, to separate the two tasks and treat the conversion of a message, of an 822-ish message, to a MIME-based 822-ish message, which is the first part that you did. Separated from the PGP, if PGP, I can't get it, anyhow, converting it into PGP-ish stuff. And one of the benefits will be that then defers the PGP versus SMIME debate and lets them focus on how do we get the header under better component control than we currently have for whatever manipulations we want to do.
I'm not sure that I understand the distinction, because I think the placement of the encryption or the signature is the critical piece of the transformation here. And so to abstract away the encryption and the signature, I mean, maybe we can talk about it later, but I'm not sure that I see how to separate that out cleanly.
Okay. So I think this touches obviously an interesting topic, but possibly a very, very timely one, and one that we ought to do well and will be worth some focused effort in the IETF.
I'm John Levine. I suggested something very similar to this, I think, here a year ago. The only difference was that instead of separating the headers and the body, I just wrapped the whole message. And Ned Fried, who knows more about mail than anybody else, popped up and said, it has horrendous patent problems, and he couldn't tell us any more about it. So now you know.
Good thing I'm not wrapping the whole message.
Well, I didn't get the impression that breaking it into two parts would make a difference there.
Yeah, Keith Moore. Yeah, my first question looking at this, I mean, I looked at it and said, okay, I'm not offended by it, but, obviously this is an important problem to address. But my question in my mind was, why separate the message? Why not just, wrap a message / RFC 822 body part? And because when you separate the message, you actually get into a number of problems, because there are pieces you want in one half of this and pieces you want in the other. So the example you gave is a bit contrived, because text plain is not a typical case for a message anymore. So really, it should be like a multi-part message.
Sure. And the whole. Can you go back to the slide actually? So to fit it on the slides, I made it text plain just because it was simpler. But anything that's where it says text plain, you can imagine that as a multi-part.
Right.
It swaps out in exactly the same way.
But as soon as you do it a multi-part message, then it actually gets a little more complicated, I think, because
I've actually done it, and I don't think it does.
Okay. All right. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, I'll be interested to see how this plays out. But I'm guessing that the reason that, or a reason that message RFC822 is not used is that some user agents want to present this as if it were a forwarded message.
That's correct.
And that's bogus, and we should call them out for it, but we probably won't give them.
How else do you expect a forwarded message to look?
The thing is, the MIME spec does not distinguish a forwarded message from some other message.
Right. So, except Alexi.
Well, if you want to display it differently, you need a signaling mechanism. So,
yeah.
So,
yeah.
People who didn't bother implementing that part of SMIME spec, they just display it as a nested message, and if there's a forwarded message, it will display exactly the same. So you need sometimes to distinguish the two.
Yeah, I agree. And then content description is probably not adequate for this purpose because it's not keywords. But yeah.
Right.
This is Pete Resnick. It would be nice if content disposition inline actually worked for this case, but lots of things would be nice. I'm not presenting this as a we must do this, but because I understand perfect enemy of the good. But I did have a question when you went through this exercise, which was clearly the envelope, the SMTP envelope, is still exposed, which means that that data can end up in receive fields, can end up in things that the MTA is going to add in. Is that, and it's exposed in logs all along the way. There's nothing to prevent that. Are you thinking that needs to be undertaken in some way, or is that an exercise for the future?
So I think that's distinct from this particular proposal.
Pete, and I might have a draft for you, which is being bashed on SMTP mailing list at the moment.
Oh, how exciting!
So if you go to my deployment slide, I do think that in order to advance the goal of minimizing metadata, work on the MTAs needs to be done. I don't actually think it's part of this particular message restructuring.
Hi, Stephen Farrell. So this came up on the OpenPGP list, as you said. Just so there's a bunch of people having a barb off tonight about OpenPGP, I presume including this topic.
I will be there, yeah.
Right, so they're going to meet in the French room at 19:30 today.
Thanks.
Thank you. Right. The next topic is privacy-oriented mail, and actually, sorry, it's Dave Crocker. I should have updated slides. But yes, you have.
So you have the slides. So this is Dave Crocker. I'm speaking on Ladar's behalf. Ladar is over to the stage left of the room. I worked with him on the architecture for the system he's developing, and he's been busily actually building it, he and his team. And so if I get any details wrong, he's here to correct them. Well, that's interesting, spilling off to the side. Nothing we can do about that, huh? All right. So the upper left, you'll see there's two presentations, one right now on the architecture and security details in the SAG session on Thursday afternoon. We're also planning to have a barb off for which there are no details yet on Thursday evening to go into more detail. The current name you see at the bottom, it's gone through some other names. Those other names will probably stick around, like Dime and Dmail. But we're hoping Prime sticks. I've been pushing to have the word dark out of the primary name so that it's less inflammatory to a broader audience. Next slide. So, yeah, we need to do something about this. This is... Who says we need high tech to solve all problems? But still.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the kinds of threats that are being considered are the ones people are generally talking about. The list here is not meant to be particularly interesting as much as diligent. The message structure disclosure might be a surprise or a concern. We talk about metadata disclosure, and then there's this classic dilemma because you've got to move the message through its hops, and you need some metadata that is publicly visible to do that. The service provider spoofing is one that is of probably obvious concern. LIDAR has rather more sensitivity to that topic than most people, because the involuntary service provider compromise is one that has caused our sensitivities to change a little bit recently. Next slide. So the attention in the design, this is for email, so a lot of the ideas can apply to other forms of asynchronous messaging probably. Automated key management is a primary effort. The concept of end-to-end encryption leads to the question of what does end-to-end mean, and the important point is in some cases for this use, it can mean one MUA to another, so that no service provider component anywhere in the sequence has access to the content and doesn't have the keys to that. Leakage of metadata, which was discussed in the previous presentation, is a concern here also, and there are steps taken to hide as much of the metadata from the handling path as seems to be possible. Next slide. So there are only two substance slides, this one and the next one, so we'll sit here for a while. So we have the classic UAMTA enhanced to MSA or MDA and message store that we all know and love. The enhancements to the architecture at a component level are to add to the MUA and also to the local operator server privacy agents, user privacy agents, and an originator or recipient privacy agent. This is where the various security and privacy related functions occur, and the reason that we wound up defining these as separate components is there are some implementation scenarios where it actually makes sense to have them sit on a separate box or in a separate module on the operating system. And so there are some ways to approach implementing this which can use some existing software and then put a layer or a wrapper around it. The approach that LIDAR has taken, you will see, integrates the message store and the MSA or MDA and the MTA for the organization together in a more general open internet style. We'd want to separate those out. The key management is separated from the privacy simply because the nature of the work to be done is different, and again, there's some cases where they might well be offloaded. The other part was I wanted to have the concept of a user-oriented or client-oriented resolver reapply the DNS model for developing things. And that's really separate from the fact that the system uses DNS as a primary storage environment for keys, but not the only storage environment. So there is a separate key and certificate server, and certificate wasn't actually supposed to be the word there. So that's my typos. The S is supposed to stand for signet. That's a term you've probably never seen. A signet, I guess I want to characterize it as a certificate but less. And so it's in the world of certificates, but it's not the same as a certificate. LIDAR will be talking at greater length about those on Thursday. Let's see, the GL there is an optional component, and I think LIDAR is going to be talking more about that, yes? On Thursday? Okay, well, if it comes up. So it's, the idea is on the right-hand side, what you see are a collection of components that are for key management and validation, including some public components for detecting compromise. These are in line with some popular discussions underway. So you will on the left-hand side see DMAP and DMTP, and you might guess that DMAP somehow relates to IMAP and DMTP to SMTP. You'd be right. DMAP is tailoring of IMAP, and if I understand where this landed correctly, if my understanding is correct, whether it landed correctly or not is a different issue, it combines the IMAP that we currently know with the posting function, and some folks will remember that there was a lot of discussion about whether IMAP should be made to do submission or whether that should remain outside of IMAP. Ladar has integrated it in. He has also integrated in the key management queries. Is that in DMAP also?
Yeah,
all right.
the
So
authenticated functionality.
So there's a single portal into all of the service functions that he's using for the MUA. Similarly, DMTP is SMTP plus the key related queries. I'll register. I'm not happy about merging all these together, but there's some obvious efficiencies that they gain. I think that covers this slide. Let's go to the next one. So this begins blank because I wanted you mostly to notice the bottom line. This slide is going to talk about who can see what as the message transits. So note we have the author and the origin, and the recipient and the destination. So this nicely separates the service provider from the users. First click. Okay. So this is the message, meaning the header and the body. The header is divided actually into two subsets. There's, and this gives you a sense of the nature of those. The body is a MIME structure. The reality is all of this is coded into a kind of MIME structure, which is why the previous presentation was so interesting to me. Well, not the only reason. Who can see this in the clear? And the answer is only the author and the recipient, and in particular the origin and destination service providers, and of course everybody in between cannot see any of this in the clear. They don't have the keys, or they probably don't have the keys. Next click. The structure of the message is clear to these guys, so the service providers can see the structure of the message. They can't see the content, but the handling agents in between along the path can't see this. Did I get that wrong? This was the point you were explaining to me yesterday. Do you security wrap at this point, or do you just leave TLS to keep that private?
Yeah, the structure is...
No, I'll repeat it.
The structure is exposed so that the access server can send out a piece of a message to a resource-constrained access.
So the structure is exposed so that the access guys can handle components. My question is whether when the message is in transit, so it's not
inside the TLS tunnel.
It's inside. So the actual security here is enforced by TLS on the outermost wrapper rather than a special object-oriented encryption wrapper. And this was one of the changes from the original discussions we had. Next click.
Oh, sorry.
Whoops, that's 2, isn't it?
How do I go back?
Back.
Previous. Oh.
Okay. The envelope, which is the receipt to and such, contains both the origin and destination in it. And what's interesting here is that the left-hand side, the local part, is hidden when it can be. Clearly, for the destination to deliver to the recipient, it has to be able to see the local port. The local part for the destination, but it doesn't need to see the local part for the author. And similarly, the origin has no need to see the recipient local part. And so these are hidden with keys that only allow the appropriate actors to see the contents. That leads to the obvious question of how you get the message delivered, and the answer is, and it's not hand is. Next click. Okay. And so the answer is that there's some portion that's in the clear, which is stylized for handling in an open transfer environment or otherwise protected by TLS. And that means that at the outermost, what we would currently call the SMTP level, the addresses that are shown are not full addresses in their usual sense. And that's part of the tailoring of DMTP. And I think that's going to be it. Next click. Oh, that's right. And then the TLS outer layer for the hop-by-hop protection. Yes. Okay, so we're hoping to have a barb-off Thursday evening and formulate some details. These are pointers. Darkmail.info is the important part to remember. The rest you don't have to. Any questions? Thursday afternoon SAG session. Oh, here we go.
Pete Resnick, I hope an easy one. Would you mind going back to, yeah, that one. So the next hop and the destination right-hand side are only interestingly different in now a smaller and smaller set of cases, right? The architecture of internet email seems to be reducing to client-server, server-client, one hop. Are we introducing new hops into this to hide things?
Dave again. So if the mail were from my service, bbiw.net, or to me, you'd probably know a lot about who was sending or receiving. And so just in case anybody was missing that point, it's clearly an essential one. And it's true, that's visible. If it were at yahoo.com to google.com, you'd know a lot less. But the essential problem that you've described is definitely present. TLS handles some aspect of that. The other aspect can be handled by other transfer environments that do, for example, onion routing. And to the extent one feels compelled to hide that outer layer further, that would be the kind of answer. It's envisioned that different kinds of substrates could be used for moving messages around depending on what level of that obfuscation you need. So thank you for raising that. Yes, and it's considered in the architecture paper, at least with a hand wave that's explicit rather than any detail.
Yeah, Philhan Baker. Yeah, I'm a bit confused about this. It seems to me like you're saying we don't want to boil the ocean, so let's just boil half of it.
Well, that's easy.
No. Actually, well, when I'm looking at a new protocol, the question that I ask is, why would somebody use this? And the answer to that has never been security. It seems to me that if we're going to go to a next generation message infrastructure, the thing that we should look at is, why is mail different from Dropbox, different from chat, different from VoIP, different from blog comments, different from RSS? At the moment we have 8 separate application environments that all do essentially the same thing. People create messages and people receive messages. They're all fundamentally doing the same thing, using fundamentally different infrastructures to process them. Now, it seems to me that if you want to get a user base of 1 billion people, and if you go for anything less, it's not interesting to me, you need to provide them with something that is a compelling use case to them. And merging all of those into one would, to me, be something that would be worthwhile doing. But I can't see tweaking the existing mail infrastructure while maintaining changing the representation without taking the advantage of jettisoning the legacy architecture. That doesn't attract me at all. I mean, you've got all the flaws of the email system and none of the advantages that would come from looking at a blank slate. So I'm a bit iffy about this.
This is Dave. Lidar is also walking up. I think a grand unified theory of messaging field theory would be great. By my estimate, about half a year ago, there were roughly 35 projects in this space working on this problem. I think this is the most ambitious one, but all of them are pursuing this. So there's clearly a lot of community interest in these categories of efforts. That said, I think a grand unified system would be great, and I look forward to that effort starting and seeing people help it.
Yeah, Ladar Levison. Phil, what I was going to say is that the key thing to take away from this system is that it gives you the ability to translate an email address into a set of keys for that particular user. And the Signet data format actually takes your sort of theorem into account in the sense that I'm not qualified to address all of those different protocols at once, nor do I think it is practical to redesign all of those different systems at once. But it does realize that once you have this key information for this particular email address, you can extend the Signet data format to incorporate its encryption keys for use in other protocols to achieve the same user-level security, user-level privacy control.
Keith Moore, short answer to Phil's question, why don't you start with a clean slate? It's called second system effect.
Okay. I think we'll move on to the next topic now.
Thank you, Dave.
Right. Short presentation about blocking outbound port 25 for dynamic IP addresses.
Hey, my name is Takehita Kagiri. I'm from Rakuten, Japan. So, next please. This slide shows the outline of this presentation. I'd like to talk about outbound port 25 blocking.
Can you speak up a bit? A little bit. Can you speak up a bit?
Okay. Which has been discussing for last 10 years around me. And I have acted in some committees related email. And this presentation summarizes the result about our experiences. Next, please. Outbound port 25 blocking is about to block sending spam emails from dynamic IP addresses, which are assigned by ISPs to their subscribers. We often show it like OP25B as a short for outbound port 25 blocking. I think managing port 25 is almost the same meaning of outbound port 25 blocking. Carrying out outbound port 25 blocking, we can block one of the easiest paths to send spam for spammers and botnets. Next, please. This figure shows a quick glance of outbound port 25 blocking. ISP can block the path of sending spam from their dynamic IP addresses because end users don't need to access port 25 directly from their computers. They usually use a submission server to send their emails. And recently, spammers and bots use port 587 with SMTPOs. After staging ident password, we can concentrate the countermeasure on MSA or outbound MTA and spams from fixed assigned IP addresses after acting outbound port 25 blocking. Next, please. This is a full-blown outbound port 25 blocking deployment in Japan. It is a basis for first draft, which we have already submitted. And this figure includes the historic path and the local station. Next, please. And I'm talking about the reasons why we should act outbound port 25 blocking. The first one is to stop sending spam at the closest point of this source. It is a way not to send spam instead of not to receive them. Also, it is better for network because we can reduce useless traffic and secure network resources for legitimate one. And second one is it makes us happen to focus on countermeasures on MSA, static IP addresses, and webmail, as I told now. Next, please. So outbound port 25 blocking has already widely adopted all over the world. In Japan, it has been a de facto standard, and in EU, some major ISPs have acted. In USA, I think Comcast and AOL has done as a beginning phase of outbound port 25 blocking. And in South America, Brazil's SAT mentioned about managing port 25 around 2010. And under my experiences, some of us who engaged outbound port 25 blocking were requested from other countries and went to show the effect and the way about outbound port 25 blocking. So I believe the document should be helpful for ISPs that has not implemented outbound port 25 blocking yet. Also, technology has already gotten mature enough. Next, please. And we have already submitted the first draft of outbound port 25 blocking. It includes some historical steps and local situation in Japan. So we need to make it simpler for ISPs that start outbound port 25 blocking from now on. Next, please. I found the past discussion like this, and issues has already solved. So there are no technical issues to carry out outbound port 25 blocking. Next slide, please. And I'm about to submit the one draft which supports the practice of IPv6 cases and remove unnecessary information such as historical and local examples. Also, we are planning to write BCOP documents for network operators group, and so is apps working group feasible for this draft?
Yeah, any comments on the presentation? Questions?
Dave Crocker, this is such a good idea that it's been documented in a number of places, including RFC 5068, which specifically talks about distinguishing 587 from 25. I suggest that you, I just took a quick look at your draft citations. Delighted to see that, and I look forward to reading it. But it doesn't cite that RFC, and you may also want to look at materials from MAWG, m3aawg.org, which is very active in this space.
Chris Newman, I was just skimming 5068, which you need to reference, so I concur with David. But I noticed it does not specifically recommend blocking outbound port 25. It just recommends using the submission port instead. So I think the next step, that document laid the framework for us to now recommend blocking outbound port 25 in this context. So I would support a very small document doing that, referring to 5068.
Okay.
Yeah, John Levine. I mean, I think this advice is now uncontroversial among most networks. And I'm wondering, given how widely known the advice is, I'm wondering who the audience for this document is supposed to be, who already wouldn't be aware of the other stuff.
Randall Gallons. Just as a note, 6409 does say, well, it actually doesn't recommend, but it describes. It says this is common practice to block outbound 25. So I don't see any harm in documenting it and recommending it. Do you think that's going to be useful to have that documented? And if you think ISPs are going to pay attention to that or otherwise might not? Sure.
Okay, thank you. Chairs will talk to you after. And that's actually the end of the allocated agenda time for this meeting. So any other issues, comments related to the application areas, any other topics of interest this week? Mark woke up. Did we bore you enough with the email section of the...
You fly here from where I flew, all right?
Mark Nottingham. We're holding a very informal barb-off tonight, and I'm a little bit sad that it's overlapping with the PGP one that DKG announced earlier. I'm so very sorry. We should coordinate in the future. We're going to talk about captive portals and how much joy they bring us all, and what, if anything, we can do to improve the situation. And I've been working a lot with different folks who we think are kind of stakeholders in that space to at least get relevant people in the same room to have that discussion. Crap. There are details on the message board. It's at 7:30 in Royal, I want to say. And there's a wiki page.
Right.
Hi, I'm Aaron Falk. I chair the TAPS working group, which is a working group in the transport area. TAPS has as its objective to look at mechanisms and abstractions that will allow applications to ask for some of the new behaviors that transport protocols other than TCP and just plain UDP can provide, allowing the development of mechanisms that will probe the ability to get them through end-to-end because things like middle boxes interfere with them. The current work of TAPS has been to look at the existing standardized transport protocols in the IETF and abstract them into what are the services that they're actually providing to applications. What would an application ask for if it wanted to have the behavior of one protocol versus another? And they've come up with a list. The draft is not done, but it's mature enough so that there's some meat there. But I, as the working group chair, am concerned that this is sort of the transport area's view of what transport protocols do. And what we're trying to do is create some abstractions for application developers to express what they want a transport protocol to do for them. And so I think that the perspective of folks who actually have tried to use some transport protocols or who think about what is it that I want the underlying transport protocols to do for me, I think it'll be very helpful. So there's going to be a discussion where we're going to look at a few different attempts to do this abstraction in the working group, and I think that having folks from the apps area be in the room to maybe say, this is more useful than that, or I don't understand, or there's a whole missing set of concepts here, would be very helpful at the point where the working group is. And I think that the goal is that we're trying to build some mechanism and abstractions to help the folks who are represented in this room. And so it's sort of in your own self-interest if you were to pay attention now. Today at 1.
This is Pete Resnick. Aaron was far too kind and gentle in his comments. Let me amplify them much more clearly. I don't like to be the one or two applications people in this room trying to explain very carefully why they're going off in the wrong direction. Please show up at 1 o'clock. please, please, please show up at 1 o'clock for TAPS. They're doing good work. Sometimes they go off into the trees and they need help from people who will be using this in the applications area to contribute to it. It's important stuff.
Keith Moore, I've just put that on my schedule, but I would like to make one thing very clear. As an applications developer, I do not want an abstraction to choose what transport protocol I use. I absolutely want to know exactly what transport protocol I'm using, because I have worked with such abstractions in the past. There is always semantic loading of associated with a transport protocol, and when you try to map from one to another, even if they are very similar, things break. Do not do this. I will be there at 1.
This is Joe Hildebrand. If there aren't more than 1 or 2 applications people in the room, that is absolutely what's going to happen, because that's what they want to do. And so I thank you that you're coming, because they haven't. The transport people have a different view of the world than we do that is more malleable than the worldview that we have, where in their world you can make changes to things like socket APIs and kernels and things like that. And it's so weird to talk to people who have that worldview, but that's the conversation that we need to have, because we've got expertise on both sides, and where those worldviews overlap is the place where we can ship software. So please come and help.
So we're not going to open up the TAPS charter in the meeting. So you're welcome to come and help and provide some contributions and help steer things. But we're not going to, if you want to kill the working group, that's not the way to do it.
Keith Morgan, to me this sounds like a failure in IESG if this has gotten far along enough that people are taking it seriously.
Why don't you learn more about it before you take it?
Okay, well, I mean, there was discussion on it earlier before I think you were here, but well, what I wonder is, I mean, it's like the whole internet is hostile to applications. Applications can barely work because of all the crap that lower layers put in here, and now we have the transport people fighting us too.
So, Colin Jennings, I'm sort of changing the topic slightly. I know nothing about TAPS, but I'm going to be an expert on it anyway. We've had a long history of transport protocols in the more recent years that didn't really work out well for the applications. We have application people trying to design transport protocols, sometimes very poorly. And I think this just all goes to the point of we need tighter interactions between these two areas and get these a little bit more organized and less conflict. So I really hope that goes to the working better together point.
This is Pete again, and to respond to Keith, the charter for this group and the way that we've been dealing with this group are actually the first positive step I've seen toward getting this applications clue into the transport area. So please do show up, but please do show up with an open mind, because this particular group, the way it is structured, I think has the potential to do the right thing in ways that has not been done before. So yes, come, but be positive, because they do need guidance, but they're not going way off in the wrong direction yet.
Thanks for the vote of small confidence.
That was fun.
Yeah.
This is Barry, and in relation to please come and give clue, Dane is working on expanding their protocol to email, to the email realm, and they will be talking about it Thursday? I forget when. Tuesday afternoon. Check your agenda. I am not your agenda. But the issue here is being able to look up keys for email addresses in the DNS and dealing with EAI issues and case issues and things like that, and various ugliness, and how to solve this properly. If you are interested in email stuff, please try to come to that and be part of the discussion. Paul.
Paul Hoffman, completely disagreeing with what you just said. Actually, those are not the issues. They came in, and there is an effort to throw them back this direction. They came in, so basically imagine that there's a working group where someone wants to find something based on someone's email address, and that's where we're at. Dane's has something where they want to find something, but then for people who are not as familiar with email, they say, oh, but email addresses sometimes have upper and lowercase and sometimes have this or that. And so that crept in. It is absolutely not a design issue for the working group. It was a side effect. So that's not what they're trying to do. What they're trying to do is to say, given this thing that we want to find by an email address, can we make it findable the right way? And there's a couple of different things that are being discussed. And just to be clear, this is a document that's in working group last call. It's related to a second document that's going to use exactly the same as what the first document's going to do. The one that's in the last call is for OpenPGP. The follow-on one is for SMIME. But the questions aren't how do we do all of this fancy, case folding and such. It's can someone with an email address find something in the DNS using a left-hand side? And if so, is there a way that the applications people would agree on this? It's not like we want to invent one.
There's no better way to get a good explanation of an issue than to give a wrong one.
Mm-hmm. Dave Crocker. So I was intrigued to hear Paul say that this issue crept into their work, and it's understandable why it did. They came into a problem and they started trying to figure out how to solve it. But of course, figuring out address resolution for email is not part of Dane's work. It's merely part of what they ran into in trying to do their work. And we regularly have this happen in the IETF. This has nothing to do with Dane per se, nothing to do with email per se. This is a case of we keep thinking cross-area review is part of what ought to catch these sorts of things. But I keep thinking we need to have these things happen sooner. For this to be raised at this point during a working group last call strikes me as much, much later than we would like. That's not a complaint about the Dane people. This is an issue in the culture here. The instant we touch something that goes across the IETF areas of expertise and experience, any of us should start worrying about getting early review, not late review. I haven't a clue how we get better sensitivity to that, and I don't think that chastising people for trying to solve problems is the right answer. But I also don't know, because this is a long way from the first time this issue has come up, I don't know how we get our consciousness throughout the organization. The best I can think of is somehow we have to get the design processes to document their abstractions earlier in the sequence and circulate those for comment, even if informally. But we have very little experience doing that. This kind of topic, this kind of debate is super important for a major infrastructure service. And so we need to have a way of having these debates much, much sooner.
And that's a good segue into why I'm still standing here, but Paul is behind me and may have a response to this. So.
I do. To one part of what Dave said, which was this is way too late in the process. It's actually not. That is, it's in working group last call, not IETF last call. And as I said, there are two documents. The author of the document of the current one, let me finish, Dave. The author of the document, the first one, has already said, I don't care how it comes out. If you all are going to correct this, that's fine. I am co-author on the second one, and my other co-author. We all agree. If the people who know how to do this come to us now, even in working group last call, and say, please rearrange it this way, as long as people in the working group don't object, we're totally fine with that. So, Dave, I understand your desire to have it happen earlier, but in this case, it's actually not very late. It's just fine.
That may be, but in the general case, it needs to be earlier for many other working groups. Dave?
Yeah, this is Dave. I want to stress that. Working group last call typically represents a significant investment of effort by diligent people working hard, and to pull the rug out from under them is the wrong outcome. And so I'd like to pull the rug out from under them earlier rather than later.
Keith Moore, I concur with Barry and Dave about that. That in this case, this may be a sort of minor thing that's peripheral to the rest of the document, and it's not a difficult fix. But if the time that you find serious changes or serious problems with the document is only in working group last call or IETF last call, it's really too late to fix it. I mean, generally, because any fix that you make is probably going to is not going to actually fix the problem, and that's what I've seen many, many times. I think the problem is actually structural in our organization. We structure this organization, whether we intend to or not, we have this organization structured in such a way that it's actually hostile to cross-area review. Because we tell people, please show up at this working group in another area, but if you're an apps person, then all your app stuff is scheduled more or less separately from the transport, unless the ADs happen to notice that there is a real reason to avoid that conflict. And we're not really structured to facilitate cross-area review, and this is a multi-decades-old problem. I'd love to see it addressed.
And that is part of what we're trying to address with reorganizing things. But the realities of scheduling means we're going to have conflicts no matter how we organize. But yes, we are trying to deal with that as part of why we're looking at shoving around responsible ADs and areas and mixing things to try to get more commingling. What I wanted to follow on with what Dave said is we're looking at changes in the applications area directorate. And I had meant to mention that earlier and almost forgot. So first of all, I want to thank Claudio Alocchio for having managed the applications area directorate for the last couple of years, however long he's been doing it. I really haven't kept track. But he's helped us a lot with that. He's not here at this meeting. Thanks to him for doing that. He's transitioning now, giving it over to Elliot Lear, who has agreed to take care of the applications area directorate now. And in the process of making a transition, Elliot and I would like to make changes to how it's run. And in particular, Elliot came up with an idea that I like and I want to follow through on. He's willing to watch new documents in working groups, watch for the 0.0 versions of working group documents, assign them to quick reviews, not the kind of detailed reviews we have been doing in the applications directorate, but take a look at this work that they've just adopted, that they're continuing on, and see if it needs apps clue. See if it needs somebody to follow it and make sure that there's cross-area considerations being done early in the process. I want to see if that works, and I'm interested in what some people, including Dave or others, think about trying that out. It's asking the applications directorate to do more work, but I think it's asking us to do work that will save us difficulties and work later in the process, and will save the other working groups difficulties later. Dave.
Dave, so the reality of email and the internet is that the bulk of the filtering of spam is done by the receivers, and nobody actually thinks that's a good model, but it's the reality we're faced with. We'd love to have spam blocked at the source. In fact, you just saw a presentation about that. And so I'd much rather have the people who need to initiate cross-area review be the authors, but failing that, having the 0.0 copy seems like an interesting idea to try out.
I agree, and we have been encouraging working groups to let us know that we should look at things. The problem is that they often don't know that they need to ask us. They don't realize that they've done something funny with URLs that they shouldn't be doing, or with internationalization, or with email addresses, and so on, and for the various applications-related things. Other comments? Go for it.
Yeah, this is Elliot. I just will ask a quick plea. If you are not an apps area reviewer, and I'm looking at people who I know are very well known, have a lot of experience in our community, my question is why not? And please, if you are able to invest a little bit of time to improve the quality of our document series, to improve the output, to make it more interoperable, to keep it from being an apps mess when something at another area comes out, I would appreciate any help that you can provide, because I'm just one person. I will mostly be just coordinating. I will do my own reviews as well, of course. But please just drop me an email, and I will do my best to arrange for you to do reviews that you think are appropriate for you. Thank you.
Tony Hansen channeling jabber comment from John Clenson. Says he can try to do some writing, but not today. But this conversation really worries him from an email address as identifier point of view, especially since EAI pushes us towards multiple primary addresses per person.
The date discussion.
So, yes.
Okay, this is Orit Levin. First of all, I think that the idea of reviewing version 00 of drafts, I think it's a great idea. And
drafts, right?
we do have one already, I think, that would benefit from reviewing it. And the other comment that I have, I actually am on the list of the reviewers. I have never been asked to review a single document. So I don't know how it happens, but.
Don't worry, we'll fix that.
Right. We have. Yes, and thank you. And we have had insufficient attention to the applications directorate lately, and we're going to try to crank that back up. So that's why you haven't been asked to review anything, because the directorate as a whole hasn't been doing very much in the last bit. Larry Masinter asks if it will become the art directorate. The current plan is to maintain separate directorates for the time being, or separate review teams, however the RAI people work. The SIP expertise will still stay separate for the moment, and we'll figure out as we continue what we want to do with that.
Okay, I think that's the end of our meeting. Going once, going twice, done. Thank you for coming, and enjoy your extra 27 minutes.
Careful. Mark, we don't want to lose you. Yes, I know. Thank you. Yeah, people are here giving compliments. So, yeah. Don't know where people lost, but
excellent.
I'm kind of surprised. I'm not sure when I got removed, but anyway.
Let me know what your areas are. I think there's an open
I think the only thing is I think the AD should actually be but I hope they will, but they, because I know I never looked at a group charter without going, is this going to be a problem for us?